The environment should complement the action. This palm tree had already been dressed into the environment. All this other stuff didn't exist. The layout just needed dressing to complement her running up to the shoreline. They chose this tree because it's parallel to the line of action. What I didn't want to do was put any sort of dressing that would compromise Moana's silhouette. And on top of that too, I wanted to make sure that when the camera came to a rest, that the dressed in foliage would keep your eye concentrated on the action by closing off the frames. When you are dressing something like this, just keep in mind that the dressing should not get in the way of the action and should not become more important than the action, which leads me to the next one. If the environment is doing its job, it doesn't draw too much attention to itself. It tells you where the characters are supposed to be and builds a world for the characters, but it doesn't get in the way. Like the position of the canoes, note how this canoe back here, it points this way. All this stuff is designed to draw your eye to like the main action. Anything in the corner is going to have extra weight. And so I put this fishing trap here and it's pointing up this way. So if your eye starts to wander around this way, it'll help to bring you back into the action. So hopefully you're picking up on this theme that set dressing also serves as a means of corralling the eye. Consider when you're dressing where you want your audience to look. And some of it can be subtle and some of it can be like over the top. So for instance, with subtle, this was pretty bare back here. So I went in and I dressed in these tea plants right here that create kind of a line. I wanted to, again, draw your eye away from the corner and make sure that the audience is looking right in the middle of the frame. Over here, it's pretty blocked off, and so I didn't really need to do anything, nor did I want to compromise the silhouette of this character. In this one, this entire shot was posed a very long palm tree that she could slide across. But then on top of that too, I wanted to make sure that all the detail was complementing that action because it's a really fast shot. So I took some of the basalt and then deformed it so that the basalt rock, all the parallel lines, they guide you towards what Moana is going to do. And then the dressing and stuff also helps to complement that. I've already mentioned this a couple of times, but the edge of the frame is really, really important. And the edge of the frame often gets neglected. Don't leave negative space in the edge of the frame unless it's intentional. Again, layout went and found an area that they had these 3 palm trees and the camera moves in. So they used those palm trees as a framing element. And I wanted to create more of a window as well. So it would have kind of a musical kind of quality to it. I brought in this hibiscus right here and then just dressed around them to give them a stage to perform on. Rhythms are very, very important because oftentimes what happens when you're dressing, people just put down a blanket of stuff and then it just becomes one monotonous thing, because rhythms also are a very effective way of how to guide your eye, because you want to have a lot of noise or a lot of stuff and then a place for the eye to rest. Andy Harkness was very big on the law of threes, where you have like 2 and then you have 1 over here. You don't have 2 and 2 or 1 and 1, you have 2 and 1. So it creates kind of this asymmetry that you can play off of. So I made sure to make use of that law of threes. So, you have 1 folly, 2 folly, 3 folly. And it doesn't have to be that extreme, like with the palm trees. This was very, very intentional on my part. 1 and then 2 right here. And then if you look back over here, there's 1 here and then 2 right next to each other. Knowing when to overlap objects is important. You'll sometimes hear it referred to as stacking, and when it's referred to as stacking, it's usually in a negative context, because when you get a lot of stacking, it can obscure depth, and it can also muddy up the frame with a lot of noise. But when you are in control of the depth of the frame, then it can be a really useful thing. So we have, like the main action where it's clear, and then a layer of stuff back here that helps to create the depth and an opening up of the space again. So the depth is apparent. If we had had a bunch of stuff here, then it would have flattened the frame out. Or if we had had a bunch of stuff back here, then this would have just become a wall of stuff. And if we didn't have this stuff here, then it would just be a big empty shot that didn't feel right. When you have cameras, then you want to be very cognizant of 2D real estate, of screen space, and use it to your advantage. The thing that's most important in this shot is this food cart, because it takes up a fourth of the frame, and so it means you're doing a lot less. If I had to dress this area down here was something that isn't in the foreground, it would have been a lot more work. It would have taken a lot longer, and you would have ended up with a flatter frame. So you want to be efficient. How can we create the illusion of depth, but make it easier on ourselves? Scale cues are really important, and this mostly applies to interiors, but it can also apply to exteriors as well, especially when you're dealing with large spaces and the scale of things can become ambiguous. Layout had gone in, they threw a bunch of buildings in here, and then they placed these giant lanterns in here. Watching it, because I had their temp animation, I felt that these lanterns here were really throwing scale. I mentioned it to Larry, and I told him it would be great if crowds could put people walking up here, because I figured if you had people walking up here and you had a railing, that would make you realize, hey, these things are really big, because you have the obvious scale of people. And were this an interior, you want to pay very close attention to the size of doorknobs, the height of chairs, the height of tables, the thickness of tables, and the thickness of just everyday objects. I got thrown this other shot here, like, oh, now we want Baymax to fly around a train. And I needed to turn it around in like a couple days. This is this right here, duplicated twice. And then this, so you see the sign right here. This is this again. And then it's mirrored over here. The point of it is you can get a lot of complexity out of reusing things in a smart way and changing it just a little bit. And then also too, this little note is really important. When you get into production, you are going to have art directors that think they are making a static image. There's a not not safe for work term that people use where they say, oh, he's pixel effing the shot. And basically what that means is they're not considering that, this is on screen for 15 frames. We don't need to go overboard with it. So this one is traumatic for me. So I spent 6 weeks making all of these routes in Maya, and then this is how it turned out. Where it's there's no light in it, it's covered in plants, and I could have spent a week on it and it would have looked exactly the damn same. If possible, ask questions and explore rough lighting early when you're building or dressing the set, so you know how things are going to be viewed. That happens a lot, actually, where the modeler spends a lot of time putting all this detail into this object when in actuality it just needs to be a shape. They lack the context of the lighting because no one's thought about it yet. And so trying to bring that forward with game engines and things will help a lot in regards to efficiency and whatnot. So